Hey guys, welcome back to the Trainer Feed. This is episode 11, and today we have a little more of an unorthodox conversation that we're going to have right now based on this crap that's going on right now in the world. How are you guys doing, though? How are you guys doing with everything that's going on?
It's
Angel.
yeah, it's been a little bit tough, just at least because we've been in New York City, so I know that there's a lot of people in the city doing demonstrations and protests. And then also, like as you've seen on the news, like a lot of you know, a decent amount of like looting and rioting as well. So, trying to stay safe, but also trying to express like your opinion and sympathies that go along with the current like environment. How about you guys?
I'm doing well. All things considered, it's uh, it's definitely a very sensitive time in the world, but in the country as well. I do feel like I've never really protested or ever, but this is something that I feel very strongly about and would really want to help make a change or a real serious effort at making a change. I know we'll go into it a bit later in the episode, but coming from an industry where we do have a lot of different diverse backgrounds of people we work with, it makes you feel that much closer to supporting them, I feel. And excuse me, I know we'll get into it, but again, just like anyone who's listening who we will of color, like we're definitely gonna talk in more detail about how this makes us feel. But like our thoughts are with you because it's not an easy time now, but has never been an easy time. David, how about yourself? How are you feeling?
Um, I'm okay. I feel good. It's just with like you said, all things considered, it's tough because it's a sort of in a way another added stressor to everything that's going on. With COVID and with the Black Lives Matter movement. And I think one of the biggest challenges that people have is telling everybody their opinion, because everybody has a different opinion on the same matter. Does that make sense? It's
Mm.
like there are people that would say, yes, Black Lives Matters, I believe in police brutality, but then would have different reasons for protesting a certain way or going about legislation that's different from other people. You know, um, for example, I've heard, and social media just it gives you so many snippets of of things that are happening that really don't make up the entire story, right?
Mm.
I firmly believe that the majority of protesters are peacefully protesting and demonstrating, that they think change needs to happen. And this change is old. It's so long overdue. You know, whatever happens in communities that are very low income, and myself included. I didn't grow up in the poorest community, but I grew up in Harlem. Back in the '90s, and that's not equating my experiences of racism with the experiences of Black people, but it's something that gets overlooked until you get the George Floyds, right? And I think it has to come from a place of genuinely wanting change rather than just showing outrage whenever something happens. Not taken away from any other experiences that people have in terms of racism, because they happen every day, and everybody has their own prejudices in terms of certain people depending on how they were brought up. But in my opinion, I think everybody needs to have an open mind to have a discussion about it. People don't need to downright criticize somebody for their opinion, but at least give them a chance to hear their side and ask what's really going on. So and it's tough. I have a friend of mine who was hit really hard by it, and he took a break. We all have a group chat, and he took a break from it because he just didn't want to see anything on social media. You know, he's like, I'm done with this. And it's tough because you want to be there for them, but in a way, you really don't know what they're going through. You have an idea of what they're going through,
Right.
but it's hard.
Yeah, I agree. I think that you know, it's hard to kind of like, because I was talking to one of my buddies about it as well, and he was asking me, like, he just kept sending me stuff. He's one of those guys, I'm sure everybody has a friend that like is always on the internet and just always sends you like links and videos, like faster than you can actually look at the videos. He's just like sending you stuff. And he was sending me a lot of stuff, and I was like, I just need like a break for a bit because it was a ton, right? So you're seeing like the protests, you're seeing demonstrations, you're seeing like counter protests, you're seeing rioting and looting, and you know, now we got curfew and all that stuff. And then I go outside because I live in Harlem, and it's like you see like cops like trying to, like, they're setting up barricades. It's not like they're trying to. They set up barricades, and they're having people like walk around the barricade in order to go from point A to point B, right? So it's like in real life, walking around, like I see it like on a daily basis, and then I have people sending me stuff. I see it there, social media as well, and it does become a little bit overwhelming. And I felt like at one point I needed to just take a break, and then the other part of me says, no, I need to immerse myself in it because I need to stay like up to date with everything, because it's a very fast developing situation. And then to your point about like the emotional side of it, it's hard to separate like the anger, the frustration, you know, the empathy that you might feel from like actually what you want to do, right? So I completely understand where you're coming from, and I agree. Like, I think that we need to like make more impactful moves, in like in terms of like legislation and things of that sort. But it's hard to kind of like separate yourself, and it's hard to like take a pause when time just keeps going by, right? Because every day that goes by, it's another opportunity for people to sweep it under the rug as like another death, you know? And I feel also like it's a conflict too, right? Because we're looking at it, we're living through this, and we're saying, all right, there has been an acceleration of the process between like arresting, you know, police officer who, you know, killed somebody in the street, regardless of whether it was murder or not murder. People are debating that. I don't know how, but there's been an acceleration of that process, and I very well think that it's because people are demonstrating not only in that town but across the world, across the country, and now across the world. So they've accelerated that process, and also like pressing charges, they've accelerated that process. Now, looking at it objectively, one could say like every time this happens, you need an equal and opposite sort of like reaction to that, right? Like every time something like that happens, we see an injustice. Do we protest again? Do we demonstrate again on a nationwide level? Like, you know what I mean? Like, and because other things have been swept under the rug, and now all these other cases that have been going on, or have been ongoing for the past couple of months, are being looked at a little bit more carefully, and things are being expedited a little bit more, right? So, I don't know. It's all a messed up situation because it shouldn't have to take that long, you know?
Yeah, I was gonna say it's
been hundreds of fucking years, and like shit like this is still going on. It's insane.
Yeah.
It's yeah, piggyback off that point, like and let's be honest, something that like is the difference here between this incident of George Floyd and, you know, those other individuals that people call it, the, you know, their lives were taken. The circumstance is different is that most of the country's in a quarantine. So many thousands of people have lost their jobs or are unemployed. Like, that tension level is higher than it's ever been. And now something like this happens. Like, I'm not saying that it would have gone unnoticed if we weren't in a quarantine, but everything happens with, and if this is like the world's way of saying this is, don't forget about what this is happening in this side of things. And like, again, I'm not saying there wouldn't have been a response or a great response if we weren't in quarantine, but I think the extent has been because there's so much tension in the country, in the world in general, and this is just like, it's tipped it over, you know, the final nail in the coffin. And while it's really upsetting to see what happened to George Floyd. If it finally means some things are going to start changing, and I am, for one, I'll put my hand up and say that, like, I may not have been part of the problem, but I could have done a lot more to be part of the solution. So, and I will say this as well. I've spoken to other people. Like, I'm being white, I will never know how difficult it is for someone of color, right? Like, I don't know what that feels like. And to tell you the truth, in England where I grew up, most of my life it was a very white community. And like when I came to the US, that's when I was establishing myself with a bit more diversity, and actually was almost like a calling, because it's like, don't get me wrong, like being non-English in UK to like being someone of color is not comparable, but knowing that you're reminded that you're different. And again, these are different levels. I don't want people to assume I'm making the same comparison, but like when you can go somewhere and you can feel that you're equal, like that's something to me I thought I was starting to feel in the United States. And then that's when I start seeing what's going on the last 10 days and what's going on for years, right? And this is one of the reasons why I came to the States, was for the diversity, the opportunity, and the acceptance of who you are, of each individual. And this is a clear indication that there's still some breakdowns in that system, in that process. And I just don't understand, like, being white, but I don't understand why there's so much hate for another race. Like, I just don't understand it. And and I don't understand the thought of thinking that, oh, I'm better than them. Like, I've never understood that. That to me is just something that I won't ever be able to resonate with. I just don't understand it. And it's like, what's crazy as well is, like, again, we are all in New York City, living in the tri-state area, but as soon as you go a few hours south, a few hours west to the Midwest, like, just to my knowledge, from what I hear, the views and thought processes are very different, right? And like, it doesn't feel like you're in the States anymore. That's just based on what I know, and that to me is crazy. But again, just reiterating that, like, I could never feel what someone of color will. Again, the uncertainty of when, hey, there's a cop outside. Like, maybe me being white, I should feel more secure, but someone of color will make me feel more insecure because, like, oh, what if he thinks that I'm just up to no good, or like, it's. I will never fully understand that, but if I can at least help move the change into more awareness into this movement, means that this no longer happens, I am all for it. But it's like you said, Angel, like, why is it taking this long? Like, we're in the year 2020. I just think it's crazy. Like, I think, and it's a little, I guess it's a little different, but we don't have sport right now. And I think that when sport is taking place, that to me is always a strong indication of unity. Sport, right? Like, there is no team usually that's dominant in any kind of form without different kinds of skilled people. Whether it means it's their upbringing, whether it means that certain players are better at different things. Like, if you look at who won the Super Bowl this year, the Chiefs. Right? This is just a generic example, but they've got talent in every different department, and it's different individuals, different races that are having the impact. And like, that's what I think, like, that is, again, is a sport, and it isn't always parallel to life, but I think it often is. It's like, that's how the world works effectively, is like everyone in different mindsets, different cultures. I think that's how it takes over. I'll ramble on, sure, but like, if you guys want to kind of take over, because I could go on all day. It makes me so angry to see this happen, and there's no need for it. Like, if you were to say 15, 20 years ago this stuff was still happening, and like I said, some people have said that, what if this video wasn't caught? What if this video didn't go viral? Well, this guy Chauvin, huh?
Yeah. No, go ahead.
I was gonna say, this guy Chauvin, the guy who was kneeling on his neck, on George Floyd's neck, he had what, 17, 18 prior complaints?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's fucking mad. Why the fuck are you still? Well, it's only because this one was videotaped that you were actually getting some form of punishment.
Yeah, and I'm gonna try to like hold back my emotions on that, because I do like understand, like, it's crazy that if if it wasn't recorded, like that would have just easily gotten swept under the rug. That's
Most likely.
and you know, like people might have talked about it locally, but it definitely wouldn't have had this impact. And there are other cases that has happened as well, right? And now you're thinking about like trying to record like the ending of somebody's life. You know what I mean? Because I even thought about if somebody had intervened, right? If somebody had intervened and it would have stopped his death, would it have had the same impact, or would it have like a completely different impact, right? And that was something that like it just didn't sit well with it didn't sit well with me, because then I was thinking he had to die. This man had to die in order for it to be brought up in this conversation and it to be this impactful, right? I mean, maybe there was another way, but like thinking about all the different options, right? If somebody would have intervened and then, you know, he would have gotten off his neck and then more people would have gotten arrested, but everybody survived. Like that would still not be seen as an injustice, right? That he was, you know, manhandled, thrown to the ground, put into a car. I mean, we still have to see the details of it, but the videos show that he got out of, they took him out of his car, he was by the restaurant, then something happened in the car when he was in the car, and then they took him out of the car, and then he was dead, right? So like, it's just, I don't know, it's a tough situation to deal with. And you know, I think like to your point, the US is probably a little bit different in that regard too, because I've been to a couple of different places, but I haven't seen as much, like, I don't know how to describe it, like as many problems with race as I've seen in different parts of the US, right? So being in New York is one thing, but you know, I traveled to Las Vegas and that's completely different. I went to Florida and that's completely different. Went to Virginia, Delaware, very different, right? So and you get treated differently too. Like people look at you, people follow you, and I think, you know, it's unfortunate that most of us have to have a conversation when we're young, you know, with our parents, and you know, when we become parents, we have to tell our children that you are going to be looked at differently, and you don't get treated like everybody else. Like just because your friend does this doesn't mean that you can do the same thing and have the same consequence. Right? Like the weight is much heavier on you. And then you look at things a little bit differently at an age where you see things as like almost perfect, right? That's the first, like one of the first like fragments to that reality. And it's a shame. It's messed up, it's a shame. Yeah.
Yeah. I think David, you want to say something? Sorry.
Yeah, no, you're right, I think, about George Floyd having to have passed, unfortunately, for this to come into light. Because I think, you know, if like what you said, let's say somebody did intervene, at the end of the day, when that happens, people are still going to say, oh, why did somebody intervene? Go get him too, you know,
Right.
or go get this guy too. And let's say it was a black person that intervened. It's going to be a whole other thing, you know, it's like, oh, you know, what's happening? And I think this is one of the first times that I've seen outrage, even from a lot of white communities and a lot of police officers, you know, and I've seen so many videos and like, you know, comments from police officers that are saying the same thing of like, dude, he's already arrested. He's on his stomach. Why is your knee still on his neck?
Yeah.
On his neck. But then you on the other side of the coin, it's like, well, we have procedures about how to restrain people and stuff like that. But I think at the end of the day, a lot of it comes down to, you know, human decency and I think compassion. You know, it's like if somebody's telling you that they can't breathe, that they want their mom, and like it's just, it comes down to a point of like, step back a little bit. You know, don't hide behind your badge. You're still a person. You know, like get the fuck off of him. A lot of it too has to do with training. I mean, and I went to school for criminal justice. I was going to be a police officer. You know, and that's it. And that's the crazy thing, because my mindset is always kind of teeter-tottering between both. You know, yeah, I understand the reason for the police. I understand, you know, that we need people that help us enforce the laws. And then on the other side of the coin, it's, well, you know, there is an injustice and this trend and this culture of just communities of color being targeted because the majority of them don't have the same education as a lot of other white communities or a lot of upper middle class communities in terms of finding, representation, reading the laws, getting all that stuff done, right? And also, it's tough because they are seen, they're seen as targets because it's easy to get away with stuff because so many things have been gotten away with.
Right.
And I have a lot of friends of mine that are police officers, and one of the first things that I've told a lot of them was like, hey man, stay safe out there, especially when stuff goes on, like with the riots and the looting. I told them, I'm like, hey, stay safe. It's gonna be tough because things that aren't even heard of are the police officers that have been killed in cold blood, and because of the rioting. And I think everything needs to be shown because at the end of the day, it's the same thing where the small percentage of protesters are the ones that are becoming violent. The same thing, there's a very small percentage of police officers that are bad, that are racist, that are thugs, that are just not built and don't have the mental capacity to analyze the situation.
I would argue that it might not be a small percentage, but there are no numbers for that, right? But
numbers in the past have been that a smaller percentage, not the majority of police officers are racist.
What I want to say was, it's not whether you can know that percentage. I do want to say that it is also fair to say that not every police. I think seeing some people post this stuff as well. It's not that anyone's against the police force or thinking all police officers are bad people, but it just so happens to be those are the ones that have caused some of these killings, and it's not every police officer is a bad person or. Just the fact that this is a serious case of police brutality. So I do want to mention that as well. Like you said, you have friends of police officers. It's not. Go on.
You got to repeat what you said. You got cut off.
Yeah, you got
all I was going to say was, it's also important to say that what that police officer did isn't a representation of every police officer. It's like anything. There's always, I know it's more than one instance, but all it takes is one person to ruin it for everyone else, right? And I think it was in Michigan. I saw a really powerful protest where the police officer, he's like, look, he goes, don't think that guy represents us and all this police officers. We're not like that. We're with you. And they put down their batons and they had a peaceful protest with them. That's a really powerful reinforcement of what I'm sure most police enforcement are like. I'm not saying they're all like that, but I'm saying it's to show that one guy in Minneapolis is not every police officer. I've seen, like you said, you have to share every side of things. And on social media, I've seen the two things, which we spoke about. We saw in Buffalo, where there's an old man walking towards that police squad and they just knock him down and he's on his back, head is bleeding. And you're like, okay, this guy looks like he might not make it. And
what's crazy about that video that really pissed me off too?
What's that?
The fact that, so two of the guys were the ones that pushed him,
right.
According to what I saw. And when one dude saw him fall, saw his head busted open, he reacted oh shit. And his buddy is the one that's just keep going. And I'm like, why? This is what's wrong. You have people that are just sitting idly behind everything and just letting it happen, knowing that they need to do something.
Right. And
these police officers just walking by him, not stopping anything. One guy's calling for something, and it's like,
it's really upsetting.
It's the mentality. It's a group mentality of, oh shit, I'm here. I have to follow everything that's going on, and that I think goes into other aspects of psychology and things that are going on within the community of the police. But like I said earlier, it has to do with compassion. You need to be able to reason and talk with a person, have the rapport with everyone else, rather than being like, I'm a cop, you need to shut up. That's not right, because people need to be heard.
That's the other thing too, not to segue too much, but I was growing up, I did a little bit of martial arts, and when they told me when I was in martial arts, they tell you the first thing that they tell you, or at least the type that I was doing, they told you you have to communicate before you result to any sort of hand-to-hand or physical contact, right? You have to be able to look somebody in the eye and tell them what you need to say or communicate the best way as possible. If you feel like you need to take a softer tone or a more aggressive tone. You need to create space. But the last thing you want to do is actually instigate a problem, because at the end of the day, you never know where that situation's gonna like come back to you, right? Another age-old thing is like in the city, like your parents probably already told you, like, don't try to fight somebody over like some small thing, because like at the end of the day, somebody could have a knife, they can have a gun, and they could just turn around and kill you, right? Just because you're equipped in a like as a law enforcement officer, like that doesn't give you the right to turn the tables on someone. You should still treat people with the same amount of caution, and the same amount of respect, because at the end of the day, you don't know what that person just went through. You don't know what that person's been through, what they're going through right now. Like there's a lot of situations, what they have on them, their mental state, their mental health. And you're going to turn around and, push somebody down on the ground, and you don't know where that person, who knows? Maybe he had Alzheimer's. Like, I don't know, but like maybe he had Alzheimer's or something like that. Maybe he was confused, and then you just pushed him, and now he's got his head cracked open. And, he might be paralyzed. Like, you just don't know the situation. There's too many variables. And excessive force in general should be the last resort. Especially, we're complex beings. Like, we have the ability to communicate. That should probably be the first thing that you learn how to do. If it's not being like a police officer or anything like that, because that's going to resolve 99.9% of the problems you have, even in hostage negotiation situations, right? Like, they teach you how to communicate. You don't want to escalate a situation that's already potentially like bad, right? Because that's going to end terribly. So I don't know. I feel like the job in and of itself of being an officer is a very difficult job. It's not an easy job by any means. And because of that, I feel like you should actually raise the bar, so that people can meet those standards, and those who can't meet those standards can't become a cop. And that's just plain and simple, right? If you are going to arm them, if you're going to give them like all this armor, whatever you need, like all that stuff, and give them the green light for stuff, you can't just have anybody sign up to be a cop. And I think like for NYPD, you only need like a couple of college credits, right? Like 12 college credits or 50.
There was a time where you only needed to have a high school degree, and then I think recently, I think I'm probably wrong, but let's say in the past 10 years, they changed it so that you need at least 2 years of college, like an associate's degree, and then you could go to the academy for, I forget how long, was it like 3 months, something like that, and then you're a police officer, And I was reading a report on a lot of other agencies around the world that you're in the academy for a good amount of time. Like, you need a 3-year college degree, 3-year college, and then almost a year in the academy before you get everything, Yeah. And it has to do with training, de-escalating situations.
Yeah, it's not about like saying, like, I'm not throwing shade and saying like a lot of people are trying to get it like misconstrued, like people are going against the cops and everything like that. It's like, everybody needs law enforcement, and then when you need it, like, then you only realize it when you need it. Same thing like fire department, right? When your house is on fire, then you realize, oh my God, I wish there was somebody here who could help. Similar situation with law enforcement. Like, I think it's necessary. I think you need it. But yeah, I think there definitely should be, because we've went through the rounds of training as well, right? We went through the rounds of, there needs to be training where we don't put people in chokeholds, where we don't do this to people, and et cetera, but it's still happening, right? So like, how many more people have to die in order for that to be affected on a national level? Instead of thinking that way, maybe we should focus on the qualifications for becoming an officer, right? As we see in New York City, like, there's still riots and things like that, but they said that New York City has like one of the highest percentages of like, or one of the highest amounts of police enforcement in a city. Like, they said, like, we have like 38,000 or 39,000 police officers.
We're the biggest paramilitary force, I think, in the United States.
Right, which is wild, right? And if it means that you might have to reduce that number in order to bump up like the quality of service, then I say you need to do that, because this stuff can't go on. I mean, I don't know. I've lived through only a little bit, a fraction of it, and I'm still young. But my parents had their fair share of police brutality. I've had my fair share of like inequality and injustice. So like I know that it's going to keep happening, and it's unfortunate. But we need to make as much change as possible, as soon as possible.
Yeah, and, it's not. It's sad to say, but in my opinion, it won't happen anytime soon. Yeah, like I said, there needs to be education. Everything that's going on in social media now, people are giving other people educational resources to learn about things that they may have, overlooked in school. And education in the beginning, it's plays a big role in how a person develops their mentality, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Jane Elliott, she's the one that did that experiment of second graders, I think, where she cut the class in half. One class had a certain quality, the other class had a certain quality, and then for I'm probably wrong, maybe a week or a couple days, that one group was seen as the superior group. The other group of the class was seen as the inferior group. And then over time, they changed it, switched it. So the group that was inferior and that were being, oppressed in the experiment were suddenly the ones that are superior now and doing the same thing to the other people,
Yeah.
Because everyone is saying, oh, well, you have blue eyes, blonde hair, whatever, you're better than this guy with brown eyes and dark hair. And there was so much outrage from, the parents of the kids. And I forgot what year the study was done in, but so much outrage. Like, why are you making my kid go through all this stuff? And she's like, well, they need to know. They need this has to be a way to educate the kids in what it is, what the world is. And it's sad. And right now, the majority of people that are making all these laws and are setting these policies are from a different time.
Yeah.
And I think it is true about, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. Like some people are just so set in their ways. And it's going to be tough to, stop them from thinking a certain way, which leads into these laws that are so favorable to one group of people.
Yeah, it's too much. It's like, not only are they old dogs that can't be taught new tricks, but they're also like, they don't have the same experience, right? It's like, I feel personally, like I shouldn't be able to, if I was a legislator, I wouldn't be able to speak to women's reproductive rights because I don't have a female's reproductive system, right? I don't know how their body works on a personal level. I can only empathize as much as I can put those ideas in my head, but I just don't know like what is right, what is wrong when it comes to that. I think it's up to the woman to decide that for herself. And the same could be said for, people of color, right? And not only is it that there's a lack of experience, but as you previously stated, like they grew up in a different time, which is arguably actually worse than the time that we're in right now, but may not have been part of the protests, may not have been part of the demonstrations, may not have had, firsthand knowledge of police brutality or even secondhand knowledge of police brutality. So they can't empathize and they can't make any change, or they don't feel like they even have that on their radar, right? Until you see thousands of people in the street.
But that, like you said right now, like they can't empathize with people because they don't have that same experience, because that's a subjective way of looking at stuff. But what if we show them objectively the numbers of what's going on? And if somebody is educated properly enough, or has enough education where they know how to read statistics, and they know how to read that, wait, this number and this number doesn't make sense. Like why is this happening? Then that would open up their minds of, okay, well, we have to look at it maybe in a socioeconomic factor of, what is going on, rather than saying like, oh, I've never seen racism, so it doesn't exist.
Right.
Well, no, how about you look at the numbers? How about you read the history?
Yeah.
And that's another thing, like reading history depending on where you are in the United States.
Yeah.
There's so many books, and I forgot where I read this, but there's so many books that are history books in the South that still show the war, the Civil War as Northern aggression to the Southern way of life.
That's wild.
even till now, like some chapters of the book are still saying, "Oh no, the North, you know, they wanted to take away our livelihood. They wanted to take away money, so that's why they took away our slaves."
Yeah.
I mean, they don't say it in those words blatantly, but that's just the way they phrase these things and teach people history.
Yeah.
You know, and it's hard because the United States was found on a lot of slavery. Like economically, that's how a lot of people accumulated their wealth. To be completely honest, right? And it's tough. It's really hard. Like now, I heard they're going to tear down the Robert E. Lee monument. I forget where it is, what state it is, but you know, it took so much for that to happen now, right? Because at the end of the day, it's like, you know, we put up this monument because he is a great war hero, and at the end of the day, it's like, well, if you look at what he was really fighting for, you know, he was fighting for, you know, the rights of people to keep their property, aka slaves.
Yeah, and even that stuff is complex too, because you know, you can see that two ways as well. Like it's all very, I don't know, like it's all very subjective to the point of view, but like you said, like arguing or challenging ideology with facts is probably, and education is probably the only way that you're gonna like see any sort of change. You have to have, I don't want to say a show of force, but you know, I think the protests are a good idea because you show how many people are behind the movement, right? Because like if it's just people commenting online or something like that, people just don't have to engage with it. But when it's enough people to stop traffic, and you know that the city's about to open up in a week, excuse me, then all of a sudden it's like, okay, what are we going to do about the protests? What are we going to do about the demonstrations, right? Like it becomes a meaningful thing that impacts many more people every day. And obviously, you know, nobody wants like rioters and looters or anything like that, but unfortunately in this case it has become a byproduct. I think it's a separate group of people. I don't think it's like one turns into the other. I mean, maybe, but
there are a lot of people. A buddy of mine went to the protest, and he was saying that his protest group was removing people that were trying to incite violence.
Yeah, and they should. They should, because it's not about that.
It's not exactly. It's about the point, letting your voice be heard and not being destructive, right? Like not. And there have been many reports saying that like most of the looters in Minneapolis are white anyway. They were just trying to cause a scene and trying to stir shit, right?
I read too, you know.
So it's as long as it's peaceful, as long as you're not trashing up the city, as long as you're not like destroying someone's bodega who has done nothing to do with the murder, right? Like that's at the end of the day, you're not really effectively communicating the message because you're just like lashing. Like I'm not justifying what has happened obviously in the last 10 days, but like you're not any more humane or appropriate if you're just smashing anything out of anger. I get you're upset. At least I could only ever imagine how upset people are, but that's not the right. I think you lose traction of your message and you lose the support you might be getting if you but I do agree with what you're saying, Angel, right? Like the more people protest, and this I know, like I have been in the city since March, but there's one thing that I feel that I'm almost guilty of right now is not being able to protest in the city, because that's, besides the last 3 months, that's where I spent the best part of my 3 or 4 years in that city, and people that we know that we work with are hurting right now and have been hurting for a long time, but especially now, like if there's ever a time to be there for them, it's now. And David, you made a good point about like it's interesting that I think you posted something about just because someone hasn't put the black square on their page doesn't mean they don't support the fight against racism.
Yeah,
right? Like you don't know what they're doing behind closed doors. You don't know if behind closed doors they're donating thousands and maybe millions of dollars to charities to help fund these projects that fight the racism or help with the funerals, or like but then you got the other side of that where someone can just post a picture and be like, oh, I've done my bit for racism. Right? You got that other end as well. Be like, oh well, look,
it's the same people that are taking pictures in front of with Black Lives Matters, like
be like this, be like, yeah, like that's honestly, if you're not in it for that, and if you're in it for the right cause, you no one may even know you were there, because it's not about, I think that showing that you care and showing that you're there and you're doing it is not a bad thing. I think it's a good thing. But like you said, how far detached are people that are like, let me get the pic, and it's the world of millennials, man, and Instagram. It's the hashtag era where like, let me just put my picture of me in a protest and it's a mask because it's quarantine. Black Lives Matter. I've done my part. And somebody even said, like, if you're just here for the fucking picture, go home. You might as well not be here. And it's true. Like, it's really like, I don't know. It's the thing that will be so iconic about this as well is you will always know this is 2020, right? The year of the outbreak of the coronavirus, masks, the protests. The year 2020, like, if you're a kid learning this in 10, 20 years, good luck, man. 2020 is in
people need to learn. People got to learn this shit.
Yeah, and I think it's important to try to like make as much change as possible with that being said too, because at the end of the day, yeah, it is going to be written in a history book, but what gets written depends on what we do today, right? Same thing with any sort of other movement, women's rights, equal rights, anything like that. If you make that history, right? So it really does fall on like us and everybody else who's listening to actually be that moving piece, which is we're going to have to become more educated. We're going to have to spend more time on focusing on this and funding more projects, right? We're going to have to demonstrate when we need to demonstrate, right? It might be an inconvenience of time or finances or whatever it is, but if you want to see that change and if you want that to be written in a history book, you need to go out there and do something because it won't get done otherwise.
Itself, yeah.
Yeah. And also, go ahead.
Cool.
I don't know. There are a lot of views, right? There's a lot of if, ands, or buts. It's like, well, they do this, but it's the whole thing with like all lives matter, right? It's like, all lives matters. Wait, but all lives matter.
Oh, I was gonna say something about that too.
And people are like, wait, no, all lives matters. What are you talking about? You can't just say Black Lives Matters. That's racist. And it's
but
like,
that's white people not understanding. That's people not.
I've heard black people. I've heard Hispanics. I've heard a lot of people say that.
We gotta address that, David.
And this is the thing. You have so many memes online that are simplifying it and dumbing it down, so everybody can understand what it means. No one is saying that your life doesn't matter. For example, Jacques, you're the only white guy here. No one is saying your life doesn't matter. But you aren't the one right now that is being oppressed.
Right.
And unless you or unless Angel, unless myself, unless our black friends, unless everyone has the same amount of, freedom and privilege, whatever, trying to find what that would mean for us. But then saying all lives matter doesn't make sense.
Right.
It's only relevant if Black lives also matter, for sure.
Yeah, I posted this thing on my Instagram. It's like it was a picture, it was a caricature, and there's like one guy is on the floor. He's like, my leg, it hurts, and then one of the guys says, hey, call his leg hurts, call the ambulance, and the guy's like, but wait, how about my legs?
Yeah,
I know.
And you're like, that makes, dude, come on, like there's some people that still don't.
I've also seen the protests when people have taken part in protests, people saying. People like giving them a hard time, but you're voicing. Everyone's got the freedom of speech. It's the land of the free, as far as I'm concerned. And people are not happy they're expressing themselves. Like a couple of places like Long Island, right? Like I say, I think it was in Merrick. Like I think New York City is one of the most diverse and melting pots in all of states and in the world, honestly. And then you go like an hour or half an hour out to Long Island, and it is so different, and it is very surprising to see that. But like, I'm not gonna go to the thick of it. But like you said, I think it was in Merrick, right? That town in Long Island, and they're just. I don't know. The other thing is they're not wearing masks. So clearly they don't believe in the virus either. You know what I think? And this is what a client told me. If you don't believe that the virus is real, it's happening, that you're immune to it. And if you're one less voter, then you'll find out if it's real. Like, to me, that just is the epitome of that mindset. Like, they don't believe in the virus. They don't think that racism is an issue. But if you're white, how can you say whether you think racism is true? Right. You're not in the position to say that. It's like for example, in the workplace, at least in the States, I don't think I've ever had a racial slur said towards me. I don't think so. Like, I could be wrong. I maybe for being British, like a joke, but nothing racial for being white.
But this is the thing too. Let's say you did.
Yeah.
Right? Let's say you did. Let's say somebody did say something to you that was a racial slur.
Right.
Does it happen often enough for you to be like, shit, this keeps happening?
Never happens. The only time, it's like never happened. I've maybe had like, when I've been to whether it was in England or New York, a couple of like neighborhoods where I might have felt less safe. I might have had like a local too, but I've never had anything serious. Like it would stick out to me if I'd had.
Yeah.
You know. Never. So I that's what I'm saying. Like I've had it for my nationality, but that's.
But also realize it. I personally, there are a lot of people like. I'm listening to your opinion, right? You're white. You have every right to say something about it, but then you have some people that are saying, "But you're white. You have no say in it." And it's like,
right.
I think that's a little off as well because you see it from a different lens, and if somebody like you,
neutral party in some respect, right? Because it's not aimed at me, but I see it's from someone else aimed at someone else, and I see it, and I'm like, there is no need for that. Yeah, and it's like, to me, there's never a justification for it. Like I don't agree with that mindset. I think that someone's better than the other parts, based on what, according to who? What makes you think you're better?
Right. Let me just say a couple of things, because David said some stuff and you kind of like piggybacked off that, and I think that it's important to kind of like distinguish it, because it is important. So like we spoke about like the All Lives Matter. David, you briefly touched on that, and then Jacques, you spoke a little bit about how like people are saying like they might say something to you, but it like almost never happens. But it's like, basically, like, I feel like there's a movement going on, and there are other things that are trying to distract that movement, right? Like you were talking about the protests or the counter protests that were going on in some places in Long Island, where it's like you're chanting Black Lives Matter, and then all of a sudden you hear like Blue Lives Matter, and it's like a counter protest to your protest. I think all these things can kind of be summed up as like distractions, right? Because you have a movement, right? And the movement is gaining momentum, and it's gaining traction, and actions are being taken because of the movement, of said movement. And then you have people who are either outside the movement that don't want it to be successful, or whatever their intentions are, that want to displace how that momentum carries forward, right? So the trajectory might be towards legislation. The trajectory might be towards equal opportunity. It might be towards education, community, police reform, all that stuff. And all these other little things, including like the looters and the rioters, these are distractions from that movement, right? To kind of change the trajectory so that way it's not as powerful when it actually hits the pavement, right? It's not as powerful when it like actually gets people have the pen and the paper, like looking at it, and they're just like, should I write this bill, or should I sign this bill or not, right? Same thing with the voting booths. I hope everybody keeps the same energy when it comes down to vote, because like you really do need to make that impact. And it's not only just like picking in a box that says like one representation versus the other representation. Like it's more about like educating yourself as to who are these people on the ballots, right? Everybody knows like probably like one or two people, but let's educate ourselves to learn everybody who's up for election, right? Everybody from like community leaders, city council, representatives, everything. Like I think district attorneys, I think that, or was it attorney generals, like that's so important. And we're noticing it now, right? Like we're noticing it now because, it goes to a DA, it's a DA's lap, and then somebody gets hit with third degree, was it murder and manslaughter? And people are like, that's not enough. Like he murdered somebody. We saw it, right? And then it goes to somebody else's lap, right? Like these are important things. Governors, mayors, these are important things that we should definitely be focused on. But I just wanted to say, like, all these other things are kind of like distractions to kind of like pivot or change the trajectory, so that way we're not successful, right? Hey, Alfie. What up, little Alfie?
See, Alfie gets it.
Alfie gets it. The second thing, Alfie's Colombian, by the way.
He's Colombian, black and white. Come on.
Yeah, there you go. The other thing that I wanted to say was something that David touched up on, was the Hispanics in the community who feel like they are anti-Black Lives Matter. Because just like you have some people who are trying to change the trajectory with like Blue Lives Matter, they also have like some people who I feel are a bit uneducated and think that they're not Black, right? That think that there's something else. David knows what I'm talking about.
Shit, dude.
That thinks that there's something else because they feel like I'm not Black, I'm Dominican, or I'm not Black, I'm Puerto Rican, or I'm Cuban, or Haitian, or whatever, right? And like for those people, like they are a distraction as well. And it's unfortunate because they look like us, right? And you see it and you kind of make, that assumption that they'll be riding with you, but actually they're not. And it's important that people know that, slavery has impacted many different places in the world, and the Caribbean, North America, Central America, and South America are no exception to that. There's just too many lines that were crossed, and too many people don't know and can't educate themselves about like their roots. And that's the primary reason, besides the fact that like slavery wasn't only the primary vehicle for transportation of like African culture to the Caribbean. I can only speak to kind of like the Caribbean because that's where I kind of like study a lot of that stuff. But there is also evidence found that there were trades between Africa, the continent of Africa, to the Caribbean as well, prior to kind of like European conquest. So a lot of that culture had been there from a while before, also to places in North America and Central America as well. So it's kind of like people are saying like they're dividing a line, or they're making a line saying I'm not this, I'm not that. But at the end of the day, you just don't know how deep those roots receded, right? Like there's just no, I feel like there's no argument, but I think that it does need to be said that some people are also distractions as well. And we just need to talk about that for a little bit. Or I just felt like I needed to say that.
It's true, and I think a lot of people fail to realize and acknowledge things in their own self.
Yeah.
I've heard it my entire life growing up. I'm Ecuadorian, right? My parents grew up in Ecuador, and it's weird because there are many times where I listen to my parents speak about their experience, growing up. And they said that in their town, there was never a Black person, ever. I mean, that you've had like people my complexion and maybe a little darker. But when my dad tells me the story all the time, it's like when the first Black person went into their town was because he was brought from the coast. So in Ecuador, you have different parts, right? So the coastal line is a lot hotter, sunnier, and especially during the slave trade, it's right where the ports are. So that area of Ecuador is has a lot more Black people than the, Midlands or whatever. But when the first Black person went into my parents' town was because he was brought in to play soccer, to play football for one of the teams there or whatever. And they said that when they saw him, they were like, what the fuck? Basically like what, like they've never seen that before in their lives. So it's something that's very, it's hard because this person that was Black is also Ecuadorian. Mm-hmm. But the first thing that comes to mind is like, wait, but you're Black and you speak Spanish and you're also from Ecuador. That doesn't make sense. Mm-hmm. And I've heard so many people in my neighborhood. I live in a predominantly Dominican, Puerto Rican, and Black neighborhood, and you have Black people, African Americans that would be like, hey, you're also Black. Mm-hmm. And the Afro-Caribbean crowd here is more of like, I'm not Black. I speak Spanish. I'm Dominican. I'm not Black. And in a way, it's like, dude, you look just like me.
Yeah, exactly.
And people are like, no, but I'm not black. And a lot of it has to do with the internal racism that is because of the pigment of the skin, and it's horrible.
Right. Yeah. Like you'll get treated differently because of that. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And it sucks because you see it in Mexican TV, like in fucking soap operas. And, you know, growing up, I would always see Mexican soap operas with my parents. And the darker person in the soap operas was always either the guy that's working the fields or the black guy. Yeah, he would either be the guy working the fields, would either be the driver. And the stars of the shows are always these, like, lighter skinned.
Lighter, yeah, I've noticed.
Yeah.
Boys. And people don't say anything. People don't realize that they never say anything. And to be completely honest, it wasn't until a couple of years ago, or I think even during college, where I was, you know, learning this stuff. It was like, I was like, oh shit, you're right. You know, like, oh my god, I never noticed it when I was, you know, watching these telenovelas with my mom, right?
Look at the superheroes, the Avengers.
Yeah, you know.
We already know about that. We try to dress up as one of these superheroes. So.
We got Wakanda. Come on, no, but you know it's hard because it goes deeper than just police, you know, discriminating against black people or people of color.
Yeah, it's deep because not only that, but like it started with how it was done, right? Like once you tell somebody, once you had a fight for the right to be considered like, what was it, 3/4 of a human being, like that's how you know, like that's the first thing, like you know that a dog has more rights than you, right? And that's something that gets deeply seated, right? And communities have to educate, and they have to talk to their kids about like what they should do, what they shouldn't do, things they could do, things they can't do, in order to kind of get away from that, right? Like that's a huge distinction, right? That's a huge distinction because you're taking away somebody's rights. Like they don't have the same rights, and now all of a sudden, like time goes by, but these things are still seated. And it's not only people thinking of you as a lesser being or a lesser person, but it's also within yourself too, right? Like you start to feel that you've been treated this way, so now you're less than, right? Now you have to work harder than. Now you have to do this, right? Like it's.
I think get the argument from people that are like, oh, but you know, you're given the same rights and opportunities, and it's like,
right.
Okay, yeah, great, but it's so much harder for me to get those fucking opportunities. It's so much harder for a person of color to get, you know, opportunities, you know, and it's like, you know, looking back into the GI Bill or back in the war, it's like, yeah, come fight for us. And then when you get home, you'll get the GI Bill so you can buy a nice house. But a lot of people of color were denied the GI Bill, you know? And it's like, shit, you know, I fought for this fucking country and I'm not getting the GI Bill because I'm black?
Yeah. A lot of, Puerto Ricans have a history with that too because their island was used for like testing of different bombs and chemicals.
Doesn't Puerto Rico have a fort, right?
Yeah, they have a fort as well. But it was just like
and Puerto Rico can't even vote.
Right. So that's another thing too. That's a different. I don't want to get into that either because that's.
No, I think that it's a sidebar. I'm not Puerto Rican, but from my view, it's like we still think of you guys as less than us, so you guys can't vote.
Right. Because you're granted citizenship, but you're not granted the ability to vote.
Like what the hell, you know? And it's messed up because it's very opportunistic, I think, from the people that are in power to get cheap work done. I mean, that's a very, you know, I think simplified way of looking at the whole thing.
Yeah.
You know, like, yeah, sure, you know, let's give these people a little bit more rights because we need help in this area.
Right.
Right. And then when we're done with them, they could be disposed. And that's messed up. And people fail to see it because they just see the thing of like, oh, but we gave you the right to fight. Like we gave you the right to be in our army. And then they just get it. But then when they really get into it, it's like, shit, okay, well, now I have to give you the same rights that I have. Now I have to let your kids into my school. Now at that point, they're like, oh, no, we can't do that.
Right. So, I don't know. Again, like, I don't want to get too far into that. But, yeah, Black Lives Matter is very important for everyone, I feel.
You gotta stay informed. You know, I was saying a book that I would recommend everybody to read is called, you know, The New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander.
That's an unbelievable book.
It points everything into the direction of people being disenfranchised.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Still being disenfranchised, you know, and it's hard. People can't get out of it. Like this book puts another tone into the phrase that racism hasn't been abolished. It just has evolved into a bigger, more complex way to fuck with you.
Yep.
You know, it's tough because let's say a black person, real quick, I don't want to take any more time, but it's like, let's say, somebody of color comes out of jail, they're like, they were wrongly convicted because somebody thought the person was somebody that there wasn't. A lot of states are like, oh shit, sorry, oops, all right, see ya. Here's a Metro card. When the person has been in jail, they don't know what the fuck a Metro card is.
Yeah.
Wait, what the fuck? What is this? I need a token.
Yeah.
They're like, what? So they don't know. First, they don't know how to get home, right? Second, they've been in prison. They're disenfranchised, so they can't apply for housing, public housing. They can't get Section 8. They can't vote. They can't get welfare or food stamps. Certain people can't live within a certain area.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're trying to get work in the city, but you can't live in the city because it's too expensive and you don't have credit.
Yeah.
So you have to go to the suburbs or outskirts of town and live, which is a 2-hour drive, 2-hour commute.
You can't vote. I don't know if you said that.
What?
You can't vote either.
Yeah, you can't vote.
Right.
And you can't apply for these things that are given to a lot of people that probably haven't been in prison. Mm-hmm. So you have all these things going on. First, you have you don't have credit. Let's say you can't get a phone. You're working a shit job, which means you probably have to get more jobs. And it's tough because you have one side of the coin there saying, well, he shouldn't have done the crime, but he never did it. Like the movie I saw, Just Mercy, was amazing. And it was about coincidentally, I started this donation thing on my Facebook for the Equal Justice Initiative. And when I saw this movie, it was about the creation of it. And it was like, oh shit, I didn't even know. But it was about people wrongly convicted being put on death row.
Yeah.
When they don't do it, and it's like, wrong place at the wrong time. I'm like, but come on,
they sweep your kids' lives underneath the rug. You know what I mean? And that's so painful. You know what I mean? I don't know.
But that's the thing. People fail to believe what we're saying because
they don't want to believe the fact.
Yeah, they don't want to feel bad. And, a lot of it has to do with, let's say, like white guilt. There are people that are guilty of what's going on. But in my opinion right now, let's say, I'm not speaking on behalf of anybody that's black or African, whatever. But in my view, Jacques, you have no reason to apologize for people because of something that, let's say, your ancestors have done. I firmly think that. Can you make a difference? Sure. You can make a difference by helping everybody out. But if you have somebody that's constantly telling you're white, your answer is this, I'm like, fuck, my answer is fucked up.
But let me make it.
I can't keep fucking apologizing for something I didn't do.
Yeah.
I think. Yeah, you make a really good point. Like, it's not. I still feel guilty because, to have the association it's not one I'm proud of. But like you said, if I can do something better than what than my ancestors or still people of my color to this day are doing. Say again?
Drink some water. You got to clear your throat.
Yeah. If I can do something that people, if I can do something more impactful than my ancestors or other white people are doing, then that's good, But also, I think at the end of the day, one of the messages that's been really communicated, I think, strong in social media was educate yourselves, man. Just know that there is so much help with all this stuff, and know that what it stems from, and we probably mentioned it before that someone who used to work with Equinox, and during the month of February, every single day he posted a picture of a lynching from 100, 200 years ago, and I think I felt so naive reading it because I really had no idea how horrific some of the lynchings were. I think I was just so clueless to it, and every single day it was a different story, a different place, different time span, but everything was fucking horrific. I'm like, I can't. And of course, it was convicting a black man, and the judge and jury were all white. How did you think that? How did they ever think that was going to come out fair? It's just the thing I think as well that I can't remember which video it is, but I think it was of a psychologist, and she asks this. It's a room full of white people in the lecture room. She's like, put your hands up if you'd rather be in their shoes.
That was Jane Elliott.
Jane Elliott?
Classic, yeah.
But the point was that, boom, everyone acknowledges that the way that, people of color are treated or looked at, isn't right, and that right there and then was like, no, I'd rather not, right? So like, to that, I think just speaks volumes of the awareness that like, people either just want to turn a blind eye because it doesn't affect them, and this affects everyone. Like if I was in their shoes, I would think, oh God, I would hope this would be better than what it is currently. You know, like that's in my thinking right now. I am very fortunate to have the luxury of white privilege. Like, and the fact that I'm not aware of it shows I have white privilege, right? And but I think if it was the other way around, I just try and put myself in those shoes. I could only ever imagine the difficulty, but I think that's what more of us in general should do, at least especially in the white community around the world.
That's the thing with a lot of people now. Oh, we can't hear you, Jacques. We lost you.
I didn't hear the last bit you said. Speak
No,
out.
it wasn't adequate representation for people. You know, it's bad, and a lot of it. You know, last thing before I say anything else, because this could also go a tangent very long.
Yeah.
But psychologically, when you degrade a person for so long, it fucks them up.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Again, there's one example. It has nothing to do with this, but like the Stanford prison experiment. If you guys are familiar with that, they were all the same college students in Stanford, right? And the fact that the people that were seen as the police or the guards were so degrading to the prisoners from the experiment, the prisoners themselves thought that they were criminals.
Wow.
They didn't do anything. It messes with you because it so much shit that
yeah.
It's like, you're not good enough. You're lesser than I am. But there's a point where the person would start believing it. Not everyone, because there are people that fight adversity and are able to pull through. But there are a lot of people that can't, and they're like,
not equipped to.
No, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. The theory of if you keep telling me that I'm a thug and I'm in a gang just because I'm black, then at some point
you're gonna break.
Might be true. Like I'm gonna fuck you. If you guys don't believe what I am, some people will be like, let me show you. And it's still apparent today, and it sucks. Yeah.
Yeah. No. Do you guys have any closing thoughts or?
So I want to just list off a couple of things that I think are good ideas, just based on what our conversation was like. So that way we can kind of close up. But yeah, so I think everybody kind of fundamentally agrees. I think education is probably the biggest moving piece, right? Educate not only ourselves, but also educate other people. Speaking to Jacques' point about how he saw the Instagram of a former employee at the place that we work, and it brought to light some things that he didn't know, right? So I think it falls on us as a community to kind of not only educate ourselves, but also educate other people. Another example I have of that is I worked with an employee at 76, whose name will not be said, and said employee he thought that white privilege was non-existent, right? He didn't think that there was such a thing as white privilege.
Uh-huh.
And I told him, I respect that ideology, and we'll talk about it. It's do you have time to go get coffee? Sure. We went. Don't say anything, David. We went to go get coffee. I don't know who it is.
I honestly don't know who.
We went to go get coffee, and I just spoke to that employee about how I felt that white privilege was a thing, and they counter argued, and we had a intelligent discussion about it. And then afterwards, I told him, let's shake hands. I thank you for giving me the opportunity to kind of speak my mind about how I felt about the subject. And he was like, oh, you don't gotta shake hands. I was like, no, it's important. It's important that it's important that I hear you, and it's important that you hear me, right? I think without that, that's how you create that divide, right? At the end of the day, we all have families. At the end of the day, we're all people. But by building up borders and not communicating or talking to people, that's how, and sharing education, sharing knowledge, that's how, I'm thinking of a word, I can't think of it right now. There's the word when two people oppose each other.
When they what?
When two people oppose each other, animosity. like animosity.
If you have an animosity towards somebody
Right.
or
That's how animosity manifests. Right. When you don't communicate, when you don't share ideologies, experiences, and education.
even if one ideology might be wrong.
I think
that's the thing. Like,
as a community, you can't see it as right or wrong. You know what happened, right? There are facts, right? But seeing it as right and wrong paints it black and white, and we all know it's not a black and white sort of discussion, right? It's bigger than that, right? Because black and white is all protesters are rioters and looters, right? That's black and white. So creating that dialogue to understand, no, there are different people, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway,
you're better at that. You're better at that than me. I would have gone on totally. I mean,
I know. My heart stopped and my heart was beating, and I was like, man, I want to punch this person in the face, right? But I stopped myself. I mean, obviously I didn't do that, but I said, what would I do? And I was reading a lot. I think reading actually helps, because when you read, you can take your thoughts and put them into logical sentences and construct them in a manner that you're not like offending somebody or whatever. Like, you can stop yourself a little bit more when you read, but that's like a different thing. I don't know. Jock can tell me about that because he did the neuroscience.
He's a scientist right here.
He's a neuroscientist.
He's a neuroscientist right now.
But anyway, so education, not only for yourself, but for other people. Like, I think that's super important. Community, building that sense of community, I think is a very important staple to everything as well. Because with the community, you can, like we've seen with the rioters and the looters, like, people in the community have gone out of their way, young people too, to clean up like different places that they grew up in, or places that they feel responsible for. I think with that sense of community, you can stop people from doing things like David was talking about with some of the protest people who went into the protest with the idea that they're going to throw bricks at people, right? And people stopping them from doing that and then giving them to the police, right? I think with that sense of community, that's going to help bring everybody together. And then you also have a respect for not only yourself and your family, but you're part of a bigger group, right? And you know the people that are in your neighborhood, right? Like, that's super important as well. So you have more respect. Voting is super important as well. So keep that same energy and go to the voting booths.
Be quiet once voting comes along. Just watch.
Just keep your eyes open, mouth closed, and go to those voting booths. Keep that same energy. That's super important.
I can't vote yet, so just so you know, it's not. I'm choosing not to.
Get out of it. Yo, Angel, kick him out of the podcast.
I was doing.
Tell Alex to put a ring on it, so that way you could.
Oh, let's go.
Well, my naturalization process
too.
No, my process to become a citizen is rolling, but my application also got put on pause when all this Corona stuff happened. So
just know that they want you to know that Christopher Columbus discovered America. Unfortunately, that's what they want you to know.
You know, it's so weird when you go to the building, to the office to start doing all the naturalization, there's a picture of Trump in there. I know he's the president, but it's just such a weird thing seeing that.
Yeah.
And the other thing that's a little off tangent, but when I was the week before his inauguration 4 years ago, I was in DC and we were in the Smithsonian museums, and there's so many of them. You guys all know when you go to DC, if you've already been, sorry. And what's so interesting was like when you go through the presentations, and it's like some of the stuff still had like it still had things with the Obamas, obviously, because he wasn't technically finished his term. But then the picture of Trump on the timeline of all the presidents, it just, again, he hadn't been inaugurated yet, but it just looks so out of place. And the security guard, who's a black male, he was like, if someone graffitis that, he goes, I didn't see nothing, and it was just fun. Because I would have turned a blind eye, and I just told him it was weird. He was like, "Yeah, it just looks out of place." And
Let me say one last thing to kind of like capsule what I was saying before. That was a good thing to say though too, because voting and your people's ability to vote varies, right? So it's important to bring that up and like also know that as well. But the last thing I was going to say is just to stay focused. And I only say that because there are a ton of distractions, kind of like what I was talking about with that momentum, and things are going to try to offset the trajectory of the movement. So it's very important to stay focused and understand the complexity of the situation, but also for your own sake, be able to take that complexity and break it down so that you can digest it, right? And not get caught up in the mix of, I'm just so upset, I'm going to lash out on the next cop I see, or I'm so upset, the next person that I hear say all lives matter, I'm going to punch him in the face.
I'm knocking them out.
I'm on site, right? Like, you know, it's important. It's so important to stay focused, because that is another distraction. Those actions are more distractions, and it creates that rippling effect, right? So understand that these people who have died, or who have been wrongfully convicted, or who have been subject to any sort of like racial discrimination, we can't let that be in vain, and we just can't let it be in vain, and we need to do better. We need to do better as a community, and we need to do better for not only our lifetime and our part of the timeline, but for the future as well.
Well said, Angel. So yeah, thanks guys for listening. This was again a bit of a different episode, and was more just like a episode for our thought spaces and time to kind of just like shoot the shit really, and the ideas and the thoughts that we're going through this difficult time. That we're human as well, you know, like we are trainers, we're fitness professionals, but like we feel all this stuff. We really have, at least I have tremendous amounts of empathy for those who are going through the harder parts right now. And yeah, we just hope everyone's well and safe right now, you know, again, not forgetting the virus is still going on. So, but we just hope you're all well and safe.
If you guys want, anybody's listening, to donate to the Equal Justice Initiative, it'll be on my Facebook, David Bravo. Anything helps. And the Equal Justice Initiative helps with wrongfully convicted felons on death row, helps to spread awareness of racial injustice. And, you know, and even if you don't want to support that group, there's so many other groups to support that really need your help right now. So ask away, send us emails. If you have an issue with what we've said, feel free to email us, and, you know, we'll be glad to have a conversation.
Yeah.
You know? Cool.
And the new Jim Crow. The new Jim Crow. That's a great
That
book.
one, and this other one called Savage Inequalities.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
All right. Good stuff there.
All right. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Be safe.
Be safe.
Ciao.